Alright folks, it is now time for me to do my UFC 183 Silva vs. Diaz predictions. You know, I've done two fight card prediction videos so far this year, and in both I performed very inadequately. I don't know what's really going on. I did pretty well with my 2014 picks, but this year, there's just some sort of weird molecular things going on. There's too many particles, I think, in the chromosphere. Interacting with my ability to accurately predict fight shows. But hopefully we can get things turned around with UFC 183. Main event, definitely one of the most interesting matchups we've had. This is like the Strikeforce main event to end all Strikeforce main events. Anderson Silva coming off that year-long layoff due to the leg injury, taking on Nate Diaz, who's kind of been sort of on a respite of sort over the last couple of weeks. Well, not a couple of weeks, last couple of months, my mistake. Apparently I'm using the same recreational products that the Diaz brothers are most famously known for. It's getting legal in most states, by the way. So anyway, Silva against Diaz. Like I said, this is like the fightiest fight of all time. These are two guys who are pretty much known for their insane striking ability. Diaz, just an absolute brawler. One of the best inside boxers probably in MMA history. Anderson Silva, considered by many to be the absolute greatest mixed martial artist of them all. Silva, who looked pretty much invincible up until 2013, that fight against Chris Weidman. We saw a gigantic gape in his hole, and he's really not unconquerable. We know he can be beat. He can be knocked out. He can also have his leg split the other direction, like the number 7. Which I don't think will happen or be a factor in this fight, but, it's something we need to bring up. So anyway, this fight. Silva has had a year-long layoff. I'm pretty sure that's the longest layoff he's ever had, or at least while he's had during his UFC tenure. Nick Diaz, I can't even remember who his last fight was with, but obviously he had the fight against GSP, and he didn't really look that good. And I think that fight kind of portends how this one will end up. Diaz, he's going to go in, and he's a guy who fights a lot like Rumble Johnson. We saw him in that big upset against Gustafsson last week. He's a dude that gets under, not really a range fighter. He gets in close. The idea is he goads you into a close fight. He gets you in that close fight, then he closes in, gets underneath you, looks for the uppercut, and then he goes to straight jab, turns into just a flat-out brawl, and makes it explosive. When that happens, more times than not, he usually wins. Now, the key to beating Diaz is pretty simple. Don't get involved in that. Don't get baited. Don't fall into the, crazy knife-wielding gorilla fight that he wants people to always have with him. If you play it smart, if you play it strategic, if you keep it ranged, if you set up the takedown, if you actually try to diversify it, you can beat Diaz. In fact, you can beat him pretty easily. GSPL showed us that. Anderson Silva, he was the enigma for a long time. Then he had the Chael Sonnen fight, the first one, when we realized this dude has no takedown defense. And like I said, since I saw that fight, I said if this dude ever fights a wrestler with knockout power, he's gone. And he saw Chris Weidman, and it happened. He got dethroned. Now Diaz, he's not really a great wrestler. He's a pretty good striker. Silva, he's fought a lot of good strikers as well. Silva, depending on what his training regimen was like, unless his ability is diminished to Dan Henderson levels during the layoff, I think he's going to win this one. He's going to win this because, despite what we saw in the Weidman fight, he is a very cerebral fighter. He's a guy who knows to strategize. He's a guy who knows to keep the strategy going. He's a guy who goes in there and knows how to win fights, not fist fights, win fights. Technical fights is scored by judges. And I don't know. I don't think Silva's going to go in there and try to do any crazy stuff. I mean, he's a range fighter. Look at what happened to Vitor Belfort. Got kicked right in the face. Look at all the dudes. Forrest Griffin. That's kind of a really interesting match with style. Diaz gets in close. Silva, when he knocks you out, he tends to knock you out at sort of a distance. So I think that makes it a very interesting standing game, if nothing else. I don't see this becoming a ground battle at any point. If it does, it's all over. Silva wins. I don't know. I think Silva, because that layoff, he might want to try to do something explosive. I don't think Diaz is really the kind of guy who has the toolkit to really pose much of a challenge to Silva outside of getting a really good fluky shot early in the first. Which, you know what, it can happen. We've seen that happen. You look at the Gustafsson-Johnson fight. That proved to you, you've got a striker's chance. You can win fights. But at the end of the day, like I said, unless there's been a major, major decline in Anderson Silva's abilities in all sectors of the fighting game, I'm going to go with Silva winning this fight. And I predict him to win this fight. Second round, submission. We haven't seen him pull off a submission victory in a while. I think he wins it with this one. And he gets Weidman for a third time. Yeah. Or maybe even Belfort. You never know how things turn out. Wouldn't that be interesting? All right. Co-main event, Tyrone Woodley against Kelvin Gastelum. Pretty interesting welterweight matchup. Woodley, he looked really good. Then he had the fight against, Rory McDonald, where he looked like a guy who's not really complete yet. He beat the crap out of Jake Shields, and that was incredibly entertaining. But it's really apparent the guy needs to kind of work on being an overall fighter in every category. That includes controlling the clock. That includes knowing how to control the tempo. That includes all the other stuff. And Kelvin Gastelum, I've been pretty impressed with him as well. And this should be a pretty good fight. Maybe not a world-setting Fight of the Year candidate, or really sort of a striky fight. But I think it should be very good on a technical level. It's hard to really make a call here, but I'm going to go with Gastelum. Woodley, he looks good. He's got the striking power, but I think Gastelum is just a little bit better in all the other categories, and as such, I give him the fight. Joe Lozon taking on Al Alquienta in a lightweight fight. Creepy Joe taking on Creepy Al, I guess. Weird Al, maybe that's what we call him. I really don't have much of a vested interest in this fight. Lozon, he's the proverbial phoenix. Every time he goes down, he comes right back up. He's a turd that won't flush. Just give him that. Taking on Al Alquienta, not really all that familiar with his work. He's one of those guys that kind of blends in the background. To be honest, this really isn't a fight with much long-term impact on the division. But I think Lozon goes in there and he wins first round. Submission. I think he went submission the same way he derailed Melvin Gillard when he was going for his lightweight reign. So yeah, no real rhyme or reason, just going with it. Middleweight matchup. You want to talk about some names that we haven't seen in just eons. Okay, Tim Bosch, which alone is a pretty obscure name thrown out there. And then we've got Thales Lites. And my battery's about to go dead. My apologies. All right, Thales Lites, I'm going to give him this one by second round stoppage with strikes. Hold on, video 2 coming up. Rest of the